This is the NHLS Speaker Series, and this Nothing Heals Like Sport series brings together a bunch of experts in fields like education, mental health, parenting, and violence prevention to help prove that sport isn't just a solution, it is the solution to the overall well-being of young people and communities. This is the second event in this speaker series. We're so excited it's here in Chicago, and it's a special one because we're actually celebrating 10 years of Chicago providing exactly what this speaker series sets out to prove, that sport is the solution, that nothing heals like sport. So we're gonna hear from the experts who prove that to be true and hear from some great folks that are going to help us spread that message and continue to get out the word. So there aren't very many ground rules to the event, mainly just the typical ground rules of any Center for Healing and Justice in Sport event, which is be where your feet are, so be present here in the room. No forced fun, you're just gonna have it, because that's what happens when I'm around. And the one that I always like to add, open mind, open ears. Be respectful to everybody who's talking and bring an open mind to what it is they have to say. Which brings me to the very best person to welcome us into this space and welcome us into this evening. Cubs leadership member, Sydney Ackler. She is a nearby Chicago native, which is somebody who tells everyone they're from Chicago, except for people in Chicago, because then they'll say, what, Naperville? She grew up in the camp space, and she now works with the Chicago Cubs as a manager for Cubs charities. She also serves as a Nothing Heals Like Sport ambassador for CHJS. So no one is better to welcome us to this event in this space than Sydney.
Thank you, everybody. I'm Sydney Ackler with Cubs Charities. So grateful that you all decided to come out tonight and join us. As Sarah mentioned, I'm also an ambassador for the Nothing Heals Like Sport campaign with CHJS. We got a lot of acronyms tonight, you'll get it. And I chose to become an ambassador because of our friend Ivan over here reaching out and saying, hey, this is for you. And you all being here tonight means it's for you too, so I'm really grateful to see you all. When I was a kid, I played basketball. I was an athlete, like many of you, I imagine. And there was one game where my teammate Jenny was dribbling, and she went down on one knee like this. And that's when I learned that that's traveling. Did you all know that? I didn't know that until then. But our coach apparently knew that already, and he was furious. He screamed. He yelled so much it made Jenny cry. And it was one of those moments where, as a kid, watching this happen, I was like, what's going on here, right? But what happened next was that he went up to her, he saw that he had done wrong, he apologized to her face to face. And that's the moment that really stuck with me as a young athlete, as a young person, to really see what the power of a coach is. And even if we are the ones causing the harm, that we have an opportunity to do some healing as coaches. The Center for Healing and Justice and Cubs Charities have partnered together since 2017, 2018. We have developed curriculum together. We have done coach training. Our coaches have been trained by the Center for Healing and Justice. And we've also found space to connect and convene with other folks in the sports-based youth development space in Chicago and beyond. So we're so grateful to be partnered with CHJS. We're so grateful that you're all here. Thank you so much. And with that, I'll pass it back to Sarah.
All right, I'm so excited to introduce the conversation, but first I want to give you a little layout for what we're doing, and I probably should have introduced myself a little more. So I'm Sarah Spain. Why am I here? Well, I made friends with a wonderful woman named Farlone who works for the Center for Healing and Justice in Sport. Raise your hand if you know Farlone. Everybody ever. Raise your hand if she's your best friend now. Everybody, yeah. Anyway, we started talking and I realized that there was so much that CHJS does that intersects with what I've talked about for my career as a sports reporter. I've been at ESPN in some capacity for 16 years. I now host a daily women's sports podcast on iHeart called Good Game with Sarah Spain. My first book just came out 2 weeks ago called Runs in the Family. Thank you. You'll hear more about the book in a little bit, but yeah, I realized that there is so much powerful magic in sport, and some of us talk about it in platitudes and don't really get to the depth of what those platitudes mean, and some of us have never even really been taught about the science behind all the ways that sport heals. And so having these conversations, getting more people out in the world advocating for the ways that sport actually intersects with science and changes people's brains is extremely important. So today you're gonna hear 3 game-changing conversations that show exactly why CHJS always says nothing heals like sport. The first one is how Chicago Parks built the foundation through 10 years of capacity building. Second, how sport addresses health equity and life expectancy gaps in our communities, which is super important. And the third, why we need to scale this work and change the narrative and conversations around sport. So I'm super excited to hear them, and I am also super excited later to talk to Megan about my book. I'm going to give you the premise quickly now so you understand why I'm up here. I wrote this book with and about the Raiders running backs coach Dylan McCullough, who formerly was at Notre Dame, before that the Chiefs, USC, Indiana, Miami of Ohio, so probably a lot of intersections with places that y'all have attended or know about. And he was adopted, raised in Youngstown, Ohio, right after the steel mill collapse of that industry, and his adoptive dad left when he was 2. So now he's sort of doubly rejected by his birth parents and the second father figure that he had, the one he never met and the one he knew, both left. And his mom dated some unsavory guys as the jobs started to dry up, and there was a lot of crime and poverty in Youngstown, and the men in the house had drug issues, abuse issues. He found football, and it was the only part of his life where he found an escape, and it got him not only out of Youngstown, but led to an unbelievable twist when he finds his birth parents. I will leave the twist potentially for later, or maybe I'll make you buy the book to hear it. But in researching the book, I dove so much into the science behind why sport felt like a safe place for him, why he had linear paths in sport, not only because of the mentors that he had, but also because of physically what was going on in his body when he stepped out onto a field, and how different it felt than the fight or flight emotions that he felt in his dangerous and inconsistent household. And understanding all of that made me even more of an advocate for the conversations that we're having tonight. So that is why I said, yes, I will be here and I will talk about this and I will sit and learn more about this and continue to evangelize. So let's bring up our first conversation about these incredible topics. You already met Yesenia. She's going to get to talk a little more this time. And then I also want to talk about Rebecca Brantman, the Deputy Director of Program Information for Chicago Park District, 15 plus years in youth development, born and raised in Chicago, now giving back through public service. She's CPRP certified, passionate about creating meaningful opportunities for youth across the city, and the evolution of the Chicago parks, especially in this 10-year intentional investment with CHGS and capacity building for year-long and summer staff is really, really important. So they're going to talk about why it's so important. And Yesenia, of course, who works alongside CHGS to revolutionize those environments and advocate for professional development and inclusive spaces. So welcome them both.
Thank you, Sarah. Hi, everyone. My name is Yesenia Mayen. I have worked for the Chicago Park District for 18 years, and I am also a CHGS trainer. I started out in the parks actually as a seasonal, and here I am. I stayed, so I'm really excited, and I want to introduce Rebecca.
Thanks, Yesenia. You'll hear me always say this, I'm really bad with mics. It's too many years in the gym and with youth without mics. We don't have fancy contraptions out in the parks. So camera guys, if I need to fix anything, just let me know, please. But yes, like Yesenia, I've worked the last 10 years with the Park District full-time. My really boring title, I'm mainly behind a computer these days, but I did start my life pretty much in the parks, 14 years as a camp kid in some capacity, 6 as a camper, 4 as this kind of junior counselor in training when you're a young teen and a young tween, and then 4 years as a rec leader, which is who we're training tomorrow at the Summer Swish Academy. So many, many years living what they have to live through this summer.
Yeah, and I think, I hope some of the information that we give you, we've seen the change from when we started as kids or young people, and just seeing the difference that it is now is amazing. So thank you for your service. So I do want to ask Rebecca a question. Can you talk a little bit about the history of Swoosh Academy and how using the resources from Nike and CHJS has made such an important impact on the city of Chicago?
Yeah. I think we also always forget that people haven't been living our life for the last 10 years. So Swish Academy, so our summer Swish Academy is happening tomorrow. For the last 10 years, we have spent one of our days of training our 1,700 plus rec leaders in the power of a sport and how it can help heal spaces and help heal youth and communities throughout the city. We serve every community in Chicago. We've got 200 plus parks. We'll have almost 200 day camps this summer. Where youth will be playing, and tomorrow we'll be training our 1,700 rec leaders there. Started 10 years ago, and it's such a multifaceted program, and I think going to what Ivan said earlier too was dose stress over the years. We started out with CHS really taking the lead, training our seasonal rec leaders in that capacity every year. So they kind of came out and they did all the training for all of our 1,700 rec leaders. And about 4 years ago, we started our Swoosh Ambassador program, which trained our year-round, Yesenia is one of them, and was one of the originals as well, year-round as ambassadors to do the CHJS's job of showing up that day to train our rec leaders. We started with 9 the first year, and we then doubled it to 18, 30, 45, and we're up to 60 of our year-round staff now. And it's something you see where we spend a day every year training our day camp directors. They're our year-round staff that lead our camps. We've always trained them every year just to kick off the year, make sure they're up to date on the content, make sure they're up to date what our rec leaders are being trained in, so they kind of know how to support them the best they are. And it's a training you'll see where, we are public servants. You have people who have seen a lot and have seen a lot of things come and go. And having built up our capacity with our ambassadors to be such powerful voices for this movement, you see it every year in that training, and you see the buy-in that we have from staff at all levels and how this works. You have to have that dose stress. These things about building connections with youth. The best thing about the parks is we're not school. We don't have this curriculum or this grade system that you have to do. We get to be this free, fun, recreation space that those youth can show up however they want, and we are there to love them and to show them and to teach them, and that how important that connection really is.
Yeah, I love that part about the not having the curriculum, because when I first when I was young and everybody asks, what do you want to be when you grow up? What a question, right? When you're 16 years old and you're not really sure. When I got into the parks, I realized that, one, I always wanted to work with kids, and I thought that being a teacher was the only route to go. But when I finally got this summer job, I realized you can have fun, you can play outside, you can just play and still work with kids and make an impact on their lives. I want to do that. And so it's great to hear from your history and your experience as well. So thank you.
And I think you also, and Sydney touched on it too, talking about you come in, you're loving these spaces, and you said you were a teen, I was a teen. These are youth that we are training tomorrow. 90% of our rec leaders are 16 to 24. We identify them as youth. We got to report fund numbers out to the mayor's office about our youth employment. But they are, and we know from the brain science, their brains are still developing, even at 20, 21, 22. Their brains are not fully developed. So being able to kind of make them aware and learn about, an unregulated adult cannot regulate a kid. And believe me, if you're a parent in this room, you know how that looks, and it doesn't always look great. But being able to expose that to them and be like, okay, this makes sense. I'm not doing something wrong. I am going to lose my cool, just like Sydney said with that coach. You are going to get upset at some point, but being able to be identify what was wrong. Okay, I was unregulated. It was hot. It was sweaty. Whatever reason, I can apologize. I can come back, and you get to build that connection with them, to build that trust over time, and that's how you build those trusting relationships. They feel safe in your space, that they can keep coming back as well. And Yesenia has spent 20 years almost in the parks.
I know. I think when I say almost 2 decades, I'm like, oh my gosh.
Has been an ambassador since the original year in 2021. We did it virtually that year too, just so everyone knows.
Yeah, right after COVID.
It was not an easy feat, but we had great buy-in from some great leadership in those meetings and those virtual trainings on Zoom. But you've been here since the beginning. You've been an ambassador for a long time. How have you seen how sport can help communities, how can make it more healing-centered, make a thriving community around your park?
Yeah, I think it was the reason the buy-in was so easy for me is because I really saw how much this work can actually help the individual and then plant those seeds for other people and make that grow. So when I think about how sport creates those healing-centered spaces, the first thing my mind goes to is that connection piece, right? So not just the connection with the individual that they make with themselves, but the connection that they make in their community. And the way to do that through sport is with movement. And I think it's so important to, when you're working with young people and you make that connection, it's not always easy. In the parks, we get a lot of kids that I always say come and grow, right? They stay with us, they grow with us, they stay in those communities, And sometimes you get those kids that are really, really excited to be there. They just want to learn. They want to build those fundamentals so they can make their school team. But other times you'll get kids who just might have been signed up because mom and dad needed them somewhere to go and they want them to learn something. And you get a variety of different personalities, some who are excited and some who are hesitant in your spaces. And the Healing Centered program for me helped me really understand that every kid is coming to us with something different. Every young person that we're training, every coach that we meet has experienced different levels of whether it's trauma or just life experiences. And you have to build that connection with each of them. You have to create that trust. And slowly but surely, especially with the coaches, understand that that impact that we're making can last a lifetime, just like Sydney said. I had a coach who, when he used to get mad, he would just yell, "God bless America!" And we knew what that meant because he didn't swear, thankfully. But then would follow up with like, "What are you doing?" And so that pressure that you feel as I don't know, I think it was 13-year-old volleyball player, not knowing what mistake I made, not having the follow-up conversations. And it's hard for girls because statistically, that's when we start to drop off, right? We get scared that we did something wrong, and so then we don't want to keep going. And so I think this work is so important because I have that chance to fix that for someone else. As an instructor, that's what I saw. Slowly but surely, not only did this help me become a better coach, but also a better parent, I started realizing that connection piece that I was making within myself, I was bringing home. And slowly having that patience, having that empathy and compassion. And I just always hope to continue to do that, no matter where we land. It's just, I'm very passionate about mental health, and I really see sport as that avenue to really make that connection with kids and hope that it starts planting those seeds within them so they can bring that home to their families and then in turn, their community. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Yesenia.
Thank you.
I'm going to hand it back off to Sarah now as we continue these conversations.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much. Folks like you are so important because folks like me have no patience. And so we love to see folks that want to dedicate so much time and energy to kids and helping them learn. And I think one of the things that stood out to me there was the idea that 1,700 people are going to walk away from that with a new skill set, and they're not just going to use it at the parks, right? They're going to take it into their house, they're going to use it with their family members, they're going to use it in their interpersonal relationships. And the more we understand about neuroplasticity and the way our brains work, we can actually be intentional about changing the way we react to situations if we want to, right? So those counselors, those kids are going to learn how to react when a kid is frustrating to them or angry or acting out, or when their anger and impatience is something they're taking out on kids, and they can be thoughtful and intentional about changing their reaction. And if they do that enough times, their brain will start doing it for them. Neurons that fire together, wire together, right? So the idea that because of CHGS and this training, there's going to be 1,700 more people taking those skill sets out into the world, unbelievable. And I also think a lot about play as much more of an important tool now because of the digital generation, right? If anybody has read Jonathan Haidt's Anxious Generation, part of what he talks about is the idea that you have smartphones in your hand makes you believe that you understand risk and when and where to take it, but because they're on their phones and not out playing, falling, scraping their knee, meeting strangers, learning how to interact with the world, they're actually not gaining the tools that they need to understand risk, anxiety, and that's why there's these generations of young people that are growing up with more depression and mental health issues. It's really deeply tied to the fact that they're not really interacting with the world around them the same way all of us did growing up. So understanding the power of play, not just because of the psychosomatic effects it has on our body or even the mental health of being told someone believes in you and you can do it and getting through adversity, but also because it simply takes us out of our devices and into the world where we can learn when we can take risks and when we shouldn't. So the work being done tomorrow is massive. Let's talk to two more people for a second game-changing conversation. Our friends are going to be talking about well-being through the lens of life expectancy inequities and how sport and movement can actually close those gaps and promote positive well-being. No one better to speak to this than Jackie Hoffman and Kathy Calderon. Jackie is the founder and executive director of Peace Runner 773. Born and raised on Chicago's West Side, turned personal transformation into a mission for health equity. He's a Lululemon and Hoka brand ambassador, a WNBA Chicago Sky Give Them the Crown Community Award recipient, and he's here right now. And joining him, Kathy Calderon, licensed clinical professional counselor, director of behavioral health program operations at Chicago Department of Public Health, 14 plus years helping youth and families implementing city level mental health equity initiatives. Welcome, Jackie and Kathy.
Hi, everyone. It's great to be here. I'm Kathy Calderon, she, her pronouns. As mentioned, thanks for the introduction. I'm the Director of Behavioral Health Program Operations at CDPH. I'm a clinician by training, so I've served families and youth for most of my career. I'm a mom of a child that loves baseball, and I also work in the public health department doing a lot of behavioral health work, and I'll pass it to Jackie.
Good afternoon, everybody. Y'all gotta bring some excitement around here. Good afternoon, everybody. Let's go. I am Jackie Hoffman, the Executive Director and founder of Peace Runner 773. I am a husband, I am a son, I am a community member. All of the above. I also work with Laureate Sport for Good with the coalition and do some work with them also, so yeah.
Amazing. I'm so excited to have this conversation with Jackie. We just met recently, but we already hit it off, and part of it is because we're really connecting on the power of sport and how there's so much intersection in the work that we do and how health and well-being is so important to each of us. So Jackie, tell us about Peace Runners and the personal connection you have to founding it, and let's hear about your mom.
Yeah, so when I started off and said I was a son and I was a husband, those were the roles that I was. Well, I still am. But I was not an executive director, as I sit here and say that title. I was the son. And who in here loves their mom? Put their hands up. I know Father's Day was there. Okay, amazing. Everybody take 1 second and think about the way your mom supported you. Take that 1 second, or still support you. Take that 1 second, and I'll let y'all know when to stop. Boom. Okay, that mother's love, the way mothers show up, the way mothers support was truly amazing. And the way she still shows up is that's my mom, matter of fact. Mom, raise your hand right here. I was looking at her and saying it, and I was like, okay, they don't know that's my mom. But I showed up for my mom. Before all of this. Sitting on the couch, and I remember it was during COVID. And it was during COVID, so the doctor office visits wasn't allowed. They were doing a doctor visit on a phone call through FaceTime, something like that. I'm like, well, how's she doing a doctor visit through that? But I'm listening to the doctor tell her about the life expectancy gap, and then directly correlating that to the area code. The area code that you live in, Ms. Hoffman, 60624, most of the people are dying from cardiovascular diseases, heart diseases, pre-diabetic. My mom was all of that. And when I say was, she was that. But immediately I remember like hearing that, and like my superhero, somebody that showed up for me my entire life. And to hear that news, I was like, I'm a fighter. Like, we finna figure out something. Like, let's Google, let's figure out what like, how can we stop this? And I remember simply it was like 20 minutes of cardio, stress reduction, and change of diet. And I was like, if you do that, then we can change. And she was like, he tell me that all the time on the phone call. And I'm like, Mom, no, we gotta do something. Action. So I challenged her to a mile a day. My mom started walking a mile a day. She came back with these older ladies that called the Young at Hearts. They the OGs. They came up and they were like walking together, walking the community together. And I'm like, man, she kept doing it. I'm walking my mile a day. And my mom has now lost over 60 pounds. Her medications have went from 13 to 0. And her doctor visits had got extended every 2 months to every 6 months. I immediately started thinking, like, how many more people in our community that don't know? Like, the number one cause of death in our community was a cardiovascular disease. That's something that we can make changes to. So, I don't know, I just changed it. I'm a genius, I guess. I started I started hanging with all these nonprofit guys and nonprofit people that's like doing the work, and they like, yeah, we're gonna do programming, because I only threw a Juneteenth event. It was a Juneteenth 5K, and I was like 20 people running around the neighborhood. We taking space, it's empowering, it's inspiring the community, it's providing so much hope. Let's do it. And let's keep it going. And like they were like, no, you gotta do a program, this gotta be qualitative data, the quantitative. I'm like, what? And like I was like, okay, we just go create a program where we have the young at heart to walk in and taking space in the community. And we got people running in the community. And like the community was like, y'all run every day? And then they were like, the walkers, they walk every day. And like what we're doing was just taking space in this community that not like for years have been disinvested, that people did not naturally run or walk. Is deemed as a not walkable or runnable community, but just by us taking space, it inspires so many more people to now, when we talk about last year alone, we ran over 50,000 miles throughout the West Side. 1,100 people have did a 5K because of Peace Runners last year. 187 half marathoners, 43 Chicago marathoners in general. This year alone, I did Tokyo, Boston Marathon. We had somebody run London Marathon. We got 5 people running Berlin. We have 6 people running Sydney, and 10 people running Sydney, and about another 20 to 25 running the Chicago Marathon. Along with all of this, it's so intergenerational to the fact that now, last year we had our first youth run the 13.1 race that ran around the West Side. But then now she's the ambassador for the youth program and the Youth Run Club, and she brought 5 more to run 13.1. So like this movement, I said this movie McFarlane, where like they started running in the community and they were like, what are they doing? But like now what is happening in Garfield Park, they can no longer deem this community not walkable or runnable because the Peace Runners are there continuously walking and running and taking space in our communities and building culture for run. Showing our youth that it's okay to run. We can eliminate that stereotype. And we got my mom out here, they like 25 deep with the Young at Hearts, and they just got their own swag. She got headbands, and she like, yeah, we the Young at Hearts, and they just like they are the heart of the community. It's to the fact that even when they walk down the street, the people that's around that's doing wrong, they make way for them. They like, mom, like, get out my way, boy. He like, all right, Miss Hoffman, we got you. But a total culture change, a total culture change, and I'm grateful to be doing the work. So that's what we've been up to.
Ooh, so amazing, so amazing. I think through hearing the story and hearing what you've built in the community with your mom and your family, the power of connection is so strong, and your leadership in that space. I think there's so much opportunity for us to connect and for us to heal in different ways, and that's why we're here. And so it's really amazing. When I heard about the work that you're doing, I wanted to add you to our strategic plan, because at the Chicago Health Department, our main strategic plan is to address the racial life expectancy gap, which is 11.4 years between Black and non-Black Americans, right, or Chicagoans, I would say. And the top driver is chronic disease, right? And so I was so happy to hear about the work that you're doing, so we can uplift you and also the community and showcase how we can do this across. So that's so amazing.
Yes, amazing, amazing. My wife is here. She does mental health, and she's a mental health clinician. So now we also provide nutrition with Good Food is Good Medicine, but then we also do mental health workshops to provide that to the community. And I know that with the Chicago Public Health, y'all are specifically channeled in onto mental health right now too also. And how do you think this correlate with the sport for you?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I am a leader in the behavioral health office, and so we have our violence prevention, substance use, and mental health. All those topic areas are key drivers to the life expectancy gap, right? So we have homicides, then opioid overdose, and then mental health is a key driver, although it mirrors what we see in the racial life expectancy gap, but it's not one of the top drivers, right? But I think, there is a lot that has to do with sport. I talk So one thing I'll say is that I met Megan Bartlett through colleagues because we're trained in the neurosequential model of therapeutics, which is a really amazing framework that was developed by Dr. Perry and is really connective in terms of how do we build shared language and concepts around sports-based healing and how to incorporate sport across everything that we do. And so I was able to work with CHJS on mental health skill building trainings in the communities in Chicago highest impacted by violence during the summer. We were able to adapt that curriculum, and some of the instructors are here today, and really adapting models so that we can build people's community and movement in that. And so as a clinician, it means so much to be able to have sport and movement. When I was a therapist in community mental health, I'd always be taking my clients out. There's a park in the back in Humboldt Park. We would always be outside doing things because that's how you learn, that's how you grow, that's how you connect. And so I think it's really important to be able to do that. But at the health department, what I've been really learning is the population-focused approach to public health and how important that is. We can have, as a therapist, an individual intervention, but we really need to treat communities, we need to treat populations, especially when we're seeing such stark lack of resources and trends around how life expectancy looks. And so I've found it very powerful working in the public health space to be able to address the key drivers.
Okay, and we got to do a call to action. What do you think? What do you think is a call to action in our space?
Yeah,
I got an idea too, so you go first.
You got an idea? Okay. All right. Well, I think it comes with building connections across those that you care about, being a part of the community, and also understanding that gaining awareness for yourself and empowering yourself will help others around you. That was one of the big key findings that we saw in those trainings. The people who showed up, it was amazing how much they built community together and learned about themselves in that. So everyone in this room, appreciate your passion and really build on that strength together. When it comes to action steps, if you check out the CDPH behavioral health programming, you can get Narcan. We have vending machines around the city that has basic needs, Narcan, fentanyl strips to help with harm reduction supplies. We have Narcan at all of the libraries, so if you're at the library, check out Narcan. We're expanding Narcan to the parks very soon in their mobile units that are deployed around the city, but also we're piloting in 10 parks. For our violence prevention, we have a variety of safe activation spaces in communities highest impacted by violence, and so joining community events that are addressing violence prevention. And then in mental health, we do have clinics and other activities around mental health. So just really encouraging you to get to know our work at CDPH. We have healing arts opportunities in all of our clinics. So I would tell you to look at our website, but just look at the calendar on our website, CDPH Behavioral Health, because there's a lot of cool events, but it's really not that organized. So just try to find the events and go to them. So those are my calls to action. I'm also happy to talk with anyone.
Okay, so the first one, for sure, I got to throw a alley hoop to myself. Come walk and run with Peace Runners. That's a call to action for everybody. Take space in your community for my leaders that are here in the grassroots space, but then also for the people at the nonprofit sector at large. Empower those people that's doing it at the grassroots level. I think that I found me a family with Laureate Sport for Good and CHJS, and they continue to, like, even when I didn't have the guidance, I didn't know exactly what it was. Like, I just was a community, like, let's get my community moving. Like, that's all I care about. The structural stuff, I've figured that out. I'm just gonna meet everybody with love, and I'm finna try to make sure that I can get as many people moving in this community as possible, because I know that this was something that this community needed. And along the way, I just continue to find good people that supported me in that way. And just support your people. Support those people and go find those leaders that's doing the work, and empower them in any way that you can. So that's my call to action, really simple.
Woo.
We're gonna give this thing
Thank
back
you.
to Sarah.
Thank you. Awesome stuff. I like how you're like, my mom showed up. No, she literally showed up. She's right there. Robin Roberts always says, make your mess your message. And it feels like that's what he did. He said, we got a little mess on our hands, Mom. Let's make it our message and not only help you, but a whole bunch of other people too, which I love. I also like that Young at Heart basically became a team. you were like, we're not just going to walk, we're going to get uniforms in the form of headbands. We're going to give ourselves a name, and people are going to clear out for us. So it just comes back to we make everything sport. Our healing comes in form of finding community, making a team, and then healing together, which I love. Does anyone in here know about the Folded Map Project? Has anyone heard of that? Because that's what that reminded me of as well. Tonika Lewis Johnson, who created this project in Chicago where she folded maps and connected addresses that corresponded on the south and north sides and west and east sides of the city to show how redlining and segregation had impacted the opportunities in those spaces. So if you go into a community and you find out on your north side what your south side corresponding address might have in the form of shops, movie theaters, banks, gyms, parks, gardens, and how that might impact the opportunities for the people who live in those communities to be well, be safe, find economic opportunity, and really understand how segregation in our city has such a tremendous impact on people's outcomes, and then what are you doing to help recognize that and change it? So learning that there are communities that people don't feel safe or don't feel like they're welcome to run and walk is just another way that those life expectancy gaps come from our segregated city and ways that we need to be intentional about fixing it. So love hearing about that. And I mean, everyone in this room should go out for some sort of walk with you, right? All right. Well, we're call to action next time is going to be a date and a location, and we're all going to have to show up there. Right now, I want to welcome up the woman who runs this whole shebang, the CHJS founder, Megan Bartlett, who's going to talk through the science behind why nothing heals like sport. We're going to chat about how we can take this narrative and actually make my mic work again. We're going to talk about how we are going to take this narrative beyond this room and make it be on a bigger scale. And good thing is, my husband always says my voice carries, so I don't need a mic. Megan is the CHJS founder. She wants every coach to understand sports' unique and pervasive healing ability, and the author of a kid's book about trauma and redesigning youth sports. She's happiest in a room full of coaches. Do we have any in here?
Yeah.
Perfect. Great.
Amazing. Thanks,
Nice
Sarah.
kicks.
Oh, thanks. I try. Am I on? Nope.
It doesn't feel like either of us are.
Off. Yep. Yep.
Leo, you're on it.
Yep. All right, great.
All right.
So Sarah gave you a big cliffhanger earlier about her book, and I am here to hype the book. I read the book over the weekend. It was so great, and there really is this incredible twist in your book. I'm not going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about the part of the book where Sarah dives really deeply into what it was about sport that kept Deland there, that kept him wanting to be part of this community. Because I think that's the part that we miss, right? When we talk about the power of sport, there are so many good things that people talk about. You rarely hear that the best thing I got from sport was a well-regulated nervous system, right? Like that's not the first answer, but that's what was happening for Deland, or at least when I'm reading it. Everybody knows I have a bias towards brains. When I'm reading it, that's what I'm hearing loud and clear, is that he felt better when he was a part of a sport community. Can you talk more about it?
Well, yeah, and he didn't know that, and that's what was interesting is actually in writing the book with him, I sort of therapized him because he hadn't been given the opportunity to go through the kind of training and read all the books and understand what was going on behind the scenes. He would just express to me what was happening, and then I would see that through the lens of the work I've done and see that he would leave a home that was, thank you, Leo. Well done. He would leave a home that was chaotic, that was unpredictable, where his body was in a constant state of fight or flight, where his nervous system was never able to say, we're good, take a break. And when he got onto the football field, a basketball court, anywhere where he could run around, even just riding his bike around town for his paper route, he didn't know why it made him feel better. But obviously we know why. Taking the big gulping breaths, being able to tell his body, we're safe, shut that off for a little bit. And I think I read The Body Keeps the Score. If you have not read that book, I cannot express to you enough how much I think it would change the entire way we do education, medicine, parenting, coaching, everything, because we truly try to shut off our brain from the rest of our body. And the correlation is so clear. And the idea that your body would be constantly stressed, pumping cortisol, literally prevents it from functioning in other meaningful ways, and is the cause of so much disease, the cause of so much unhealth. And instead, we mostly hear about disease that's carried through genetics or potentially environment, when so much of it is under our control of understanding and regulating our own mental health and wellness.
Absolutely. I think the part where it's taking those big breaths and engaging in patterned, repetitive, rhythmic activity, which is so important and so healing. And then the other piece, which is the actual twist in your book, is being around people who help you feel safe, who help you be able to turn that fight or flight system off, be able to sort of regulate in a way that allows you to take that break, allows you to, and you could tell he just felt different in those environments. And he did have one coach in particular who made him feel safe.
Right, and I think there's all that research that essentially says if a child has one adult who shows up and believes in them, who they feel safe around, that can be it. And I've worked with a group in Chicago called Embark for a number of years, and one of the biggest lessons I should have already known, but really became clear to me from talking to the students there, was that you never know what happened just before someone showed up at the space you're in. Whether that's school, whether that's a park, whether that's camp, whether that's class. Their childhood and their life at home might be an absolute mess. And when they step into that room, what they're bringing in there could be abuse, could be trauma, could be hunger. And the reaction to that isn't punishment. It's trying to seek and understand the root of it and then heal it. And so having a coach or a mentor or somebody who just cares enough to ask and help solve, and having the play and the opportunity to be in a space where you're regulating your body, which will mentally, literally help you in terms of your mental health, but also your belief in self, your confidence, your community, all the other stuff.
Amazing, yeah. So I really mean it, read the book. But we don't hear enough of these stories. So you did all this research for your book. You understand now sort of the unique power that sport has to help support people who have been through more than we wish they'd been through in their lives. And I'm really curious about, and I think this room, there's a lot of people who work in this space. There's a lot of people who believe really deeply in the power of sport. I'm curious what you think as a person, in the sports media. How do we make more of these stories break through? Like, we just heard Jackie's story, and like, what could be better than knowing what Jackie did for his community, and yet not enough people are paying attention to it?
Yeah, you know what stood out to me about that was how often we can all say we've heard the same thing our entire lives. Drink water, get good sleep, move your body, go out in nature, be in community. It's literally every single message. How can we commodify those things? How can we sell them? How can we package them? It's pretty tough, and that's why we don't hear about them as often as we should, because it's easier to sell you a spa retreat or an eye mask that helps you sleep or a water that makes you feel better, that has electrolytes, Brondo. We've all seen Idiocracy, right? We're living it right now. But yeah, it just feels like the obvious things sometimes are what slips by. And to your point, it's because the messaging is simple. We're not selling you water, sleep, nature, community, rest. We're trying to sell you all the other shortcuts. And so the idea that it would take that messaging of this could kill you, this will make you sick, to really wake up for some people means we got to do a better job. And part of it is storytelling, whether it's Jackie, whether it's my book about Dylan. And I think it's also simplifying it. I'm a science-brained person. When I learn about neuroplasticity and the way the brain works, I then try to synthesize the ideas and evangelize for it to people who aren't as interested in reading books about neuroscience, but are interested in understanding that if they do a gratitude practice every night, their brain will start looking for the good without them asking. And how much of a game changer is that? If you tell yourself a different story when you go out in the world, your reaction to people might be different. When I see someone being a total a-hole, I sometimes just say, wow, they must have gotten some really bad news today. Or, oh gosh, they must be caring for a sick parent. Or, oh man, maybe they got fired. Doesn't matter if any of those things are true. In my brain, I have empathy for them, and now either I'm going to help them or I'm going to avoid them still, but it's not going to get my nerves going. I'm just going to say that's too bad for them. I hope it gets better. Instead of reacting back as a fellow a-hole, which I still do sometimes when I'm not in a regulated space or I'm very tired. But the idea that you can choose to do that and then do that repeatedly until your brain just goes there, because it says, oh, you keep asking me to do that? Great, I'll just create a quick little bridge over there and I'll get there faster, and you won't have to go through all the steps of first reacting and then figuring out what you want to say and how you want to react back. But how do we get people to know that and to realize that their day and everyone else around them's day will be better if they learn those things?
Yeah. We talk a lot about once, when you understand this, once you see the world through the power of sport to regulate your nervous system, you can never unsee it. And so, you know, in the same way that you're saying, you think about people, oh, maybe something bad happened to them today, right? Just the simple giving grace to someone who's not maybe at their best. At CHJS, somebody's in a meeting and not their best. We're like, I wonder if maybe that person could use a walk. Like, it could help, right? Instead of assuming that they're mad about something or they're, sort of taking it out on. When we start to take things less personally, when we start to see the world through all the things that we know to be true, it really makes a huge difference. And for us, one of the things we're trying to do is figure out how people can learn, how people can hear the message that you're sending, that you're simplifying from the brain science, the message that Jackie is taking out on the streets every day. To me, that's the call to action. Like, how do we make sure that this knowledge that we all have, because we read Sarah's book, because we read Body Keeps the Score, because we read The Boy Who Was Raised as a Dog, or What Happened to You by Dr. Perry, then it makes such a huge impact, not only on the people that you're trying to sort of work with, but on yourself too. We need more of it.
Well, and if you look in this handy dandy packet or page booklet thing that you have on your chair, which hopefully is preaching to the choir.
A playbook?
A playbook.
Yep, that's
perfect. There are some pretty simple plays in there that you can start with. And when people realize how well those work, whether or not they truly understand the why of why they work, then potentially they buy in more to digging in. So one of them that I flipped past that seemed pretty meaningful was the idea of some sort of repetitive action when someone is in a moment of overwhelm. If you have a kid that wants to quit in the middle of practice and says it's too hard, instead of being mad at them, instead of immediately trying to reintegrate them, give them some sort of meditative practice that resets things. Do I know exactly why? No. But it sounds like something that will work. And if you get coaches to understand that and kids to understand that and even be able to do that for themselves, I use box breaths when I am having a moment of overwhelm, and sometimes Taylor Swift's Folklore. It's a good combination. That's my personal combination. Walk, dog, folklore, box breaths are my 4 tools. It is magic, especially the dog snuggles part. There's science there too. But yeah, I mean, I think, so part of it too is also understanding the ways to get to people. So that can be in a playbook. It can be in infographics. It has to be, sadly now, in TikToks and social media and short clips. And so the key is to get to the most number of people with the most creative outlets, ways, and audiences so that they receive it wherever they are. Because unfortunately, you do end up preaching to the choir if you're mostly speaking in academia or spaces where people will have read all the books you listed off, as opposed to being able to literally get to a kid who's struggling because they flipped a TikTok and it got to one about joining a team or finding community in sport or just going to the park. Right, running with Jackie. Or learning.
Now we're all gonna do a TikTok.
Right, yes. I'm gonna teach you a dance. We're gonna start with the 1, 2, 3, 4 from before, and then we're gonna add 35 steps. No, but also I think getting back to what Jackie was saying, understanding how resources prohibit kids from taking advantage of that and infusing communities with the things that could be that one little step between. I was on the Gatorade Women's Advisory Board for several years, and we were really trying to get to the heart of understanding why girls are quitting sports at twice the rate of boys, right around 6th and 7th grade. And it's a number of reasons, but one of them is resources that are denied to girls and given to boys in a lot of communities. One of them is something as simple as sports bras or period protection and just being talked to about that and how they can still play through it. And so I think it's this multifaceted effort that takes everybody in their own space.
Okay, you have your marching orders. That's what we have to do. That's why we were here. We wanted to make sure that we sort of all are starting from the same place, all starting with the same language, all starting with the same sort of background and understanding about the real power of sport, so that we can take it in all the different ways to the 1,700 people tomorrow, thanks to the Chicago Park District and Nike for making that happen, for out on the streets in Jackie's neighborhood and with the Young at Hearts, and through amazing works like your book. This is only together and only when we're sort of all speaking in the same way are we going to make the change.
Yeah. I'm going to bring everybody that was a speaker up so we can do some Q&A. And while we're doing that, I just want to have everyone think a little bit about the biggest takeaway they took tonight and who they're going to share it with. It can be several takeaways, but let's start with one and think about someone that would really benefit or a community that would benefit from you telling that person your takeaway. And we invite you to join this movement. You can promise yourself and others that you'll make sure you see sport through the lens that we see it through and as the solution it is. You can promise yourself and others that you'll see it as an untapped solution that needs to be better spread and talked about and is helpful for millions of people and athletes. And if you're already a believer, great, keep it up. Talk about it more, tell more people. If you're not, come up and tell us how we didn't yet convince you to believe. And feel free after we're done up here with the Q&As to stick around, connect with the speakers, ask questions, all that stuff. The bar does reopen at 7:30, so talk about it over wine. But yeah, there's also resources you'll be able to get from tonight. The recap will be on CHJS YouTube, so you can watch the whole thing and you can send it to anybody you think would benefit from it. Of course, take your playbook and spread it far and wide, and then there are going to be some more sessions throughout the year, both virtual and in major cities, so keep an eye out for those. And you can also join the CHJS collective action work, so make sure you stick around if you want to get even more involved, and then you can meet Farlone if you haven't met her yet. And if I didn't already tell you how great she was and that she's going to be your best friend, now's your chance. All right, thank you to the Cubs for this space. Let's do some Q&A. I can probably walk and give the mic to anyone who has a question. Of course, Ben, from the aforementioned Laureus.
Okay, my question can be for any of you, but your name is Center for Healing and Justice Through Sport, and I want to talk about the justice side. We talked a lot about the healing side. So there's so much going on in the world right now. And we talked about like why sport is overlooked, but in this moment, like when we're talking about undocumented people being kicked out of the country and trans people not having an opportunity to play sport and all these major issues, like why does sport matter in that context? How does it intersect with all the other things that are happening?
I have what I think is a quick answer, and then I'll pass the mic to whoever else wants to say something. Unfortunately, in this country, there are people that we do too many bad things to, as a country, on an individual level, and on a societal level. And basically what's going on in your brain is that you have you're balancing the good things and the bad things. And the bad things just keep getting weighed down and down and down. And the only thing that actually unbalances or rebalances that are good things. Right? The opportunity to engage in the opposite kind of experience. So if you have all of these negative experiences, what balances that out is positive experiences. And there's no place like sport to get as many positive experiences, to get as many protective chemicals as you do when you put all of the things that everybody talked about together. When you put those safe people, the opportunity to move your body, and the opportunity to engage in challenges that aren't overwhelming, right? The opposite of overwhelming stress is not no stress. It's the right dose of stress. And in sport, you get to do the right dose of stress. So much of right now is overwhelming stress. We need so much dose stress.
You said most of what I was going to say. No, but I want to also just speak from experience. Is like sport. I've worked in a variety of different communities on the north side, and so sometimes the north side gets this reputation, depending on the community, that they have all of these resources, but we forget about some of those neighborhoods that don't. And they, whether it's further east or getting a little further towards the central, having worked in a lot of those communities and seeing how sport has provided that opportunity to have that safe space, as a Latina, it wasn't something that I think was explained to me as a kid. And when I got into the park space and I saw that opportunity to just play and have fun and then work with CHJS and learn more about how it's so important to also address the mental health part, that is where I see the justice taking place. And so thank you for, providing the opportunity, and just our hope is to keep that going.
One last quick thing too from me about being like in the sports space as a sports reporter is that it is one of the very few spaces in which everybody intersects regardless of race, gender, religion, etc. Right next to you at the Bears game is someone you might never talk to, and you are there and you are rooting for the same thing, and then you want to talk about why you like our quarterback or you hate our coach or whatever it is. And when you create those rooms full of people that come from disparate places with completely disparate backgrounds, you can engage in conversations about the intersection of society and sport in a way that you wouldn't otherwise. You're never going to reach those people. As a sports reporter, I know often I'm talking to people on the radio or television that otherwise don't want to listen to me, and then I sneak something in about social justice or trans inclusion or racial equity, and suddenly they're hearing a perspective that they otherwise aren't hearing on some of the other places they're giving their time and energy. And so sport can be this really powerful place to trick people into opening up their minds to new things.
I think what came up for me is power sharing. I think we all have power within us, and depending on where we stand and where we come from, it's important to claim our power in ways that help others and to provide that space so you can bring out the important pieces. What we're living in is so complex that you take a step back, that we have to consider how do we get a simple message across about going outside to nature, to be able to move? How do we convince people of this? But the great thing about sport is that you could do it and you can feel it right away. Ivan helped us out right at the beginning of this to create that community, right? And so I think justice comes from us being able to reclaim that space that otherwise wasn't there, and to be able to transcend the stressors of what we're going through together, because it's a lot of adversity, but I think collectively it'll help transform us to a different place. And really, especially in government, being able to do the best we can to be as efficient as possible, and to really push ourselves to be able to not just kind of succumb to gloom, and to be able to say we're in a space of power in government where we can bring in sport, we can think creatively, we can bring resources. We just have to put a lot of extra work into it in the back end, but we'll do it.
Yeah, a little bit what Sarah said, like sports provides the platform to amplify voices. When you come up in a community as Garfield Park, I didn't know it was underserved. I didn't know about the disinvestment in 1968. I came to this room, how many people knew about the disinvestment in the West Side community since 1968? Who knew about the food insecurities that's going on and the economic problems that we do have on the West Side and the South Side of Chicago? Sports provides that platform for people to go out when they seen me run a marathon at 275, and they like, what is he running for? What's his cause? I'm running for the West Side. They better bring the resources, But me being on that stage and us doing it in numbers, always the people power, and just doing it in numbers, and it amplified the mission, and I was amplifying and hearing voices that people never heard before on the West Side, and now resources are starting to come. So yeah, it provides us a voice.
I think Leo's got the mic.
Questions?
Leo, move those feet.
Thanks, Leah. I had a question just about CHJS, and with addressing trauma specifically, it seems like from a coach perspective with athletes, how do you address it if maybe the sport, the coach, the staff, or other people within the sport are the ones causing the trauma?
Absolutely, it's such an important point, because this whole time we've been talking about sport when it's done right, not just sport without any guardrails, right? Because sport without any guardrails, we know, has created environments in which athletes are exploited, in which they're abused, in which they are, sort of taken advantage of in lots of different ways. And so the first and most important part of all of this is doing no harm first, right? And so we hope that part of what we're doing by taking a more public health approach, getting the sort of basic idea to more people, is that you start to see things like athletes understanding that it doesn't have to be that way, right? We've seen so many more athletes who are willing to stand up and say, this is not the way it should be. This is not what's right. This is not what's good for athlete performance, for athlete mental health. And so I think part of it is sharing this message as widely as we can so that people know what to look for and what not to look for. They know what does make a good sport environment and what doesn't, because I think without that, we will continue to have sport acting in a way that actually actively disencourages people or specifically can be traumatic.
There's a great researcher, Nicole Lavoie, who runs the Center for Girls at Minnesota. I'm bad with the middle states, even though we're in one. But one of her focuses right now is changing stereotypical ideas of what a good coach looks like, because unfortunately representations in media and otherwise have traditionally been a very loud, angry man. And particularly in women's sports, that model has not been particularly effective. So that's another thing, is the storytelling around what it looks like to be in charge, what it looks like to have command of a group of people and to have them buy in. And that comes from media representations and also, to your point, from athletes, whether that's Simone Biles talking openly about how the U.S. women's national gymnastics team is faring better because they're putting joy back into their practice and joy back into their competition, or other athletes speaking out about, traumatic experiences or otherwise. But yeah, a lot of it is really just putting out a different message than the one we've been sending the world for decades about falling in line, militaristic approach. My way or the highway, they won't hear me if they don't fear me. BS.
One more?
Where's Leo?
Questions?
Oh, there's one over here, Leo.
Going in the front.
What first made you interested in joining CHJS?
Yeah, that's a great, it's really the power of the people in this room. You met so many really cool people. And to me, I thought, hey, if all of these people were working together, we would be so much more powerful. And so that's how I feel like my superpower is collecting incredible humans like your mom, and trying to bring them into this message, trying to get more people fighting for the same thing. Anybody else? All right.
I think some of what Sarah said earlier too, it's the community. So a community where you feel safe to show up as yourself, no matter who you are. You always are met with empathy and welcome in that day. And they just create this team environment. And if you go through any of the trainings, it's always about team time. And especially in sports, we know the importance of team, but that can translate even outside the field as well. And how do you build that team where everyone has their role? You don't have to be good at everything. You don't have to do everything, but you're part of that team, and together, working together, we're stronger than individually.
I heard Farlong speak, and she spoke one time, and I was like, man, she amazing. And then, if she's watching this, I love you. We love you. she definitely inspired me in this space and continue to inspire me to be a voice. So, gotta throw that shout out there to.
Leo, do
More
we
questions?
have one more, or we?
Any more?
Oh, yeah. Oh.
Oh, there's another one.
So what resonated with me a lot was talking about supporting young women in sports, and something as intricate as talking about safe sex and period practices, all of those kind of things. What have you found to be successful tactics to those things, especially with the growth of women's sports over these last few years and the trajectory it has for the next few years? Especially young women that I particularly work with are a lot of high school age women, so they're going through a lot of things. So I'm just curious, what are some successful tactics that you guys have found, particularly with that demographic and that audience, especially somebody who's talking about population-based approaches, which is, I think, something that's really important too, and especially when dealing with young women from all kinds of different backgrounds. So I guess, what are successes?
Awesome, thanks. One of the things that's been most successful for the CHJS team is making sure that we're helping girls focus on being brave and not perfect. The pressure that a lot of middle and high school girls are under to be perfect is almost debilitating. And so how do we create environments where it's safe to take risks, where you can try new things without being judged, and where truly, even if you just say the word brave more, they start to be brave more. And so from our perspective, it's changing that narrative when there are so many forces acting in the other direction. But
Did you have one or no?
Yeah, I can. So I was talking about population focus. So from the public health perspective, you're looking at primary, secondary, and tertiary prevention strategies, right? And so especially in the mental health space, we think about group therapy, think about individual therapy, and all the kind of traditional modalities. And so part of the work that we did at the intersection of violence and mental health was look at how do we build that community from the bottom up, how do you engage community and then build that across. And so we were able to take the amazing content of sport, the sport, NM sport model, to be able to make it applicable and to build that community across. And so when it comes to young girls and groups, how do we take them outside? How do we make sure that they're doing things that are able to build their confidence with their body and be able to practice those social skills that they may not get to at school, right? And as a therapist, again, kind of being able to take people outside of the office setting. And so from the health department perspective, how do we design programs that encourage innovative models, right? Service delivery models that infuse more movement into traditional therapy practices? How do you integrate healers in the community where they may not have a therapy, like a therapist, a license or a doctorate, but they are a huge part of the community and they're making all those connections. And so really building all those touch points for people so that they can get that interface with someone who can help build their confidence and provide some healing through relationship and through opportunity.
And just to build off what she said, I think the language that you're using is incredibly specific, particularly if it's offsetting the language that they're seeing elsewhere. So for young women in particular, the expectation for what they look like to be the most important thing. I read a really depressing article about some girls choosing sports based on which ones they would look the best in the outfit or while playing because everything is filmed now. You want to judge them for that, but if we had been filmed at every single sweaty moment of our sport and then it was put somewhere, we might be thinking about that a little more too. And I think in particular for myself, being this height already when I was 12 and developing early, the way that men interacted with me, not knowing that I was 12 or 13, was deeply upsetting and took me out of my own body because it felt like it was for other people to look at, and sport put me back in it and felt like it was doing something for me. So having conversations with girls about what their body does for them, even simple things like, wow, man, your legs churn so fast when you're running, or like, wow, I can't believe how strong you're getting. Things like that that are about what it's doing and how you're making it do something for you as opposed to how it's being received or perceived by others is so important. And it's one of the biggest reasons why sport can help girls and women who do struggle with body dysmorphia or body disorders or overeating or eating disorders, any of those things, because it gets them back into what their body does instead of what it looks like. And I think just it feels repetitive, but that language over and over just has to be there to offset the millions of other signals they're getting from everywhere else.
Good questions. Yes? Anyone got questions? I think this will be our last one. Yeah? Sounds like good. Questions?
Oh, one more in the back. Leo's really taking that moving your body to heart.
You're so fast. Thanks. Thank you for all of the really important work that you all do. It matters so much. My question is, when you feel like you're doing really important work, but it is hard, right? I know that you all have hard jobs, executive directors, working in government agencies that I'm sure are not always the easiest to navigate. What is the thing that helps you? And I know you may have answered this already with your why sort of earlier, but what are the things that help you keep going? What are the things that inspire you on a difficult day? Or the things that you do to stay regulated? So just sort of curious from people who are leaders in the space how, and you don't all have to answer, but curious what your advice to other people in those spaces are, knowing it's really important work, but it's not always easy, so.
I'll go first. I did feel like I kind of said it earlier with community, but I think also just honestly individual moments. It's really true. You can trudge through something really long and hard, and then when you go out and you see the work being done in communities with youth, with your team, and it's just like it all comes together in such a way that you're like, oh, this is pretty cool actually, and all that kind of other stuff getting there, you totally forget about. So just all those little moments when it all comes together really do make it worth it.
On top of that, I would probably say prioritizing self-care. Because in order for us to be or show up in the best way possible is to make sure that you're doing that for yourself as well. When crazy situation happened to me not too long ago, I had stopped working out for a little bit, had gotten injured, and then kind of got a little like stagnant. And then I went back and I saw my coaches, and I was in my safe space with my women in the class studio. And as soon as I started to work out and just move, I started to cry. And I didn't realize, I mean, it's like that aha moment. We talk about it and we teach it all the time. I didn't realize how much I was holding in. And sometimes the work is hard, but when you do prioritize that for yourself, then you really can share that mission with anyone and tell them this is important, and it'll help. So yeah, that's what I do.
I can jump in.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. We got a mic from the other side. I think a couple things. One is developing self-compassion. There's a self-compassion screening that you can do and kind of see where you're at with that. Building those skills. I didn't really know how much that can weigh you down if you're lacking self-compassion, and how you build those skills. It's individual to each of us. The other thing, as I've been kind of gained more leadership capacity within the health department, is the power of our own narratives and how that dictates the decision we make in our workplace and whether we engage with someone or not. And so really helping challenge our own narratives around things, or how do you create that space so that you can really be authentic, to be able to talk to people, even if it's hard, and to be able to get to a better place. Because most of the time, if we can have that conversation, have that safety around it, we can really kind of move through some of the narrative pieces that might be more kind of in our head. And then finally, and this goes back to sport, just doing the best that we can to create unstructured space for a long time where you don't have to worry about the hours or the day in nature, just kind of finding a space somewhere you can just let loose by water, and just really have fun and just kind of let everything flow out.
Mine is a little bit self-care adjacent, but it's also about knowing yourself well enough to avoid destructive habits. So you're not in control of your work environment and the difficulty that you might face every day, or the trauma that you're dealing with, or the people that you work with, or the stressors of it. But in the moments away from work, are you being intentional about how you spend your time, what you're digesting? I personally know the feeling I get if I'm doom scrolling and it's been too many things in a row. My front of my face gets really hard and I feel it going like this, and I'm like, oh, I gotta get out of here. I'm about to have like I haven't had this often. I've had 2 panic attacks, but they came when I was just not listening to the signals from my body that were like, no more, this is too much. And so I have tips in my social media. If you go on Instagram and hit the 3 little dots, you can snooze suggested posts. You have to do it every 30 days, but it keeps you from being fed something you didn't request or ask for, and it keeps you from letting the algorithm dictate what you're seeing, which to me is why I don't really engage in TikTok and other spaces. I don't want to be at the whims of some algorithm deciding what I'm looking at. That's just one example, but understanding for yourself if there's shows you watch, people you interact with that you've just been friends with forever, but they're deeply toxic and they don't actually bring you anything good, can you make a different choice so that when you do go back to work, you've made the rest of your spaces a little bit better for you?
Mine's is just living in gratitude. I always tell myself I get to do this. I also got a cheat code because my wife is a mental health clinician, so like anytime that I
just burden her with it.
Yeah, anytime it goes down the drain, like let me lay down and let's talk and vent. But yeah, living
like I'm off the clock, babe. What's your advice for me?
For real. But living in gratitude, I promise you, is that I get to do it. I know it's tons of other people that in worse situations. I was working a full-time job and doing the executive director work, a peace runner, shaking hands, kissing babies, going to the meetings, part of 5 cohorts, showing up for the community, showing up for everybody else in the community to make them feel supported. But I just told myself I get to do it, and I know that me showing up is like helping move the needle. So just like me being in the work and knowing that something is moving forward, I'm grateful for it. And if that's the end of it, if that's my legacy, then that's what it is. I'm here for it. So, yeah.
Love that. What a great way to finish. An attitude of gratitude. Gratitude practice fixes almost everything. Really does. Thank you all so much for being here. Thank you all for listening and being a great audience. Don't forget your playbooks. Spread them far and wide. Thanks again. Oh, and the bar's probably back open. Stick around and mingle and network.